Hello, my name is Owen Vanderpoy, and my video project is on Darius the Great. Some basic info about him. He ruled as the king of Persia for 36 years from 522 BCE to 468 BCE, which was when he passed away. He ruled at the geographic peak of his empire. When he was ruling, the Persian Empire was bigger than it had been and would be at any point in his history or in its history. And he is known for his buildings and his benevolent means of ruling his diverse kingdom. Because he had such a large area of land that his empire covered, he was going to have very diverse groups. He had Egyptians, he had citizens of the Indus Valley, he had Greeks, he had Persians themselves. So he was very benevolent. He was a good ruler of this diverse kingdom. He was born to a father who served in local government, which is uncommon for a person who isn't born within the royal family to become king. But and although he wasn't royal family, he was still a family born into a family with power and influence. And he actually plotted for the throne at an early age. And after a series of deaths, which to this day are still debated on who killed who when, and a person claiming to be the king in the former king's absence, Darius eventually claimed the throne in 522 BCE. And when he claimed the throne, there were a couple small rebellions across the empire, but because they were quick and small and unorganized, he was able to put them down relatively quickly and with relative ease, which got his rule off to a pretty smooth start once he was able to put those down. In terms of expansion, as I mentioned earlier, he ruled at the geographic peak of the Persian Empire. And when he inherited the throne, he inherited a already rather large empire, but he still did his fair bit of expansion. He expanded all the way to the Indus Valley, which is in modern day India, and finally conquered it in 515 BCE. Egypt at the time was under Persian rule when Darius came into possession of the throne, but they're ways away from the Persian capital, and so he returned to Egypt and solidified his rule and control there, expanding all the way to modern day Libya. And he also stretched north to surround the east and west edges of the Black Sea, which, although he didn't have the north coast, gave the Persian Empire pretty much naval control of the Black Sea, which feeds into the Mediterranean, which was huge in terms of trade, power, conquest, all that. Now, the big thing in his rule was his involvement with the Greeks. And at the time, the Persians controlled much of Macedonia and eastern Greece that lays in modern day Turkey, right along that coast of Ionia. And there were actually a fair bit of Greeks that were pro-Persian rule, pro-Persian involvement. And he actually launched a campaign to conquer Greece and take over Greece because that was a very powerful group at the time. And his army was actually defeated by the Athenians at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. His son Xerxes took over the Greek campaign after Darius died, and Xerxes is most famous for leading the Persian army at the Battle of Thermopylae, where the Spartan soldiers made their last stand in a triumphant effort to protect Greece from the Persians. Although Darius never was able to see what the Persian army would attempt to fulfill under Xerxes' control. In terms of his policy, he had his empire divided into provinces, each to be ruled by a local satrap, which was basically a provincial governor. In the way that we have states today, they had provinces ruled by a governor, but it wasn't sole rule by that governor. They had checks and balances in place. Every satrap had a treasurer to make sure that they were doing the right things with their money, because each province had to pay a tribute to Darius, being under his rule, except for the province where the Persian capital lied. And this was one of the first really, really well documented uses of checks and balances, making sure that these local satraps weren't abusing their power, weren't doing anything to corrupt their local government, while still being in control of a fair amount of area within their province. And Darius also had a group of royal spies throughout his empire to ensure order and squash any rebellions or revolts or plots against the king or local government. And he was also very tolerant of other religions within his kingdom. As I mentioned, very large kingdom, covered a lot of area, which meant a lot of different people. So you have the Egyptians. The Egyptians were the big ones because they had a very established religion with all of their different gods. And Darius was actually very tolerant of this. He supported their own individual worship of Egyptian gods. Same thing with the Greeks that were in the Persian Empire. He allowed them to practice their own religion with their own gods and not enforce one unified state religion, which was relatively unique for this time. In terms of his economy, he greatly improved the road system, and that allowed the Persian Empire to facilitate trade, and it made their economy flourish. It made everyone in the empire wealthier from the top down. Obviously, King Darius was going to take the bulk of this wealth, but the local satraps also got a fair chunk, and even the local artisans whose products were being traded across this vast empire, they were becoming wealthier too. And part of this wealth was that Darius made his own currency called the Daric. And the Daric was two different types of currency. There was the gold Daric, which could only be produced by King Darius himself, and the silver Daric, which was produced by local satraps and was much more widespread, was used to recruit soldiers, possibly from other places outside of the kingdom. And the outside of the kingdom part is really notable because the Daric was recognized as legitimate currency even outside of the empire's borders. So that just goes to show how important the trade and everything was, and the road system was, to this empire and their success, especially King Darius' success. And lastly, he focused a lot on building. His wealth allowed for very expensive building projects. A majority of these projects were palaces and temples. A lot of the major cities within the empire, Darius constructed palaces for him and his local government to do their work from, to have a place to stay when they're checking up on other places within the kingdom. And he also built a lot of temples, and not only temples for his own religion. He was a ruler that believed to be there by divine right. But he also, when he first traveled to Egypt when he first inherited the throne and first traveled to Egypt, he actually built a fair amount of temples there for the Egyptians to continue practicing their own religion and worshiping their own gods. And he did this all over his kingdom for all different religions. And this is a big reason why he was able to, maintain the respect needed to rule a kingdom of this size, because the people appreciated what he was doing and allowing them to practice their own religion, not feeling like he was forcing his ways upon them. And he also built a canal in Egypt, which, again, that's just another example of him working to ensure that trade is a big part of his empire. And he actually died during the construction of many of these temples and palaces. And a lot of these were carried out by his son Xerxes. similar to how his military pursuits were carried out. And that concludes my presentation. Here are some of the sources I used. Thank you.